My name is Elena Brooks, and I was 9 years old when my father died. I don't remember the exact date the way some people do. I don't remember the weather either. What I remember are fragments. Sounds. Smells. The way adults whisper when they think children aren't listening. I remember sitting on the edge of the couch in our living room in Columbus, Ohio, my feet not quite touching the floor. I remember my mother pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. Her socks sliding slightly on the hardwood each time she turned. And I remember the ring. It was on my father's hand when they let me see him one last time. Not for long. Just a moment. Long enough for my eyes to land on it and stay there. A simple band. White gold. One small diamond set into it, not flashy, not trendy. The kind of ring a man buys because he means it, not because he wants to show it off. I didn't understand then why that ring mattered so much to me. I just knew that when my aunt gently guided me away, and the nurses pulled the sheet up, something inside me grabbed onto that image and refused to let go. For years after, when people asked what I remembered about my dad, I said things like, "He used to make pancakes on Sundays. He smelled like sawdust and coffee. He whistled when he was fixing things." All true. But what I didn't say, what I couldn't explain, was that the ring felt like proof. Proof that he had existed. That he had chosen us. That he had been real. When you lose a parent that young, memories get slippery. They fade at the edges. You start wondering if you're making things up. Objects don't do that. Objects stay solid. After the funeral, life moved forward the way it always does for adults. My mother cried quietly at night. During the day, she functioned. Packed lunches. Signed permission slips. Paid bills. People told her she was strong. No one asked what I needed. I didn't know how to ask. A few weeks after everything settled into a strange new normal, I asked my mother where Dad's ring was. We were in the kitchen. Late afternoon. Sunlight slanting through the window, catching dust in the air. She froze for just a second. Barely noticeable. "It's put away," she said. "Can I see it?" "Not right now, sweetheart." That word, sweetheart, was still new then. It felt like something she used when she didn't want to explain more. I nodded. That became a habit. Over the years, I asked about the ring maybe 3 more times. Each time, the answer was vague. "It's somewhere safe. I'll show you when you're older. It's not important right now." I learned quickly which questions didn't lead anywhere. By the time I was 12, my mother met Richard. She called him Rick at first. Said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. "He's just a friend." Friends didn't start coming over for dinner twice a week. Friends didn't start sitting in my father's chair. Friends didn't tell me to clear my plate faster because we don't waste food in this house. I didn't dislike him immediately. That came later. At first, I just noticed how the air changed when he was around. He talked a lot. About his job. About politics. About how things should be done. He corrected people constantly. Not loudly. Just enough to remind you he was in charge. When my mother laughed at his jokes, it sounded different. Tighter. Like she was checking his reaction while she laughed. I watched all of it quietly. I always watched. When they married 2 years later, I stood beside my mother in a pale blue dress that itched at the neckline. I smiled when the photographer told me to. Rick wore a dark suit. And on his hand. Nothing. No ring yet. I didn't think about my father's ring then. I should have. But grief doesn't move in straight lines. It hides. It waits. By my 20s, I had learned to live with absence. My father existed mostly in stories I repeated to myself so I wouldn't forget them. The ring became symbolic. Something I assumed would come to me someday. Not because anyone promised it but because it made sense. People always say things like, "You'll have it someday." That should stay in the family. He'd want you to have it. No one ever says when. Or how. Or what if someone decides otherwise? Life moved on. I moved out. Built my own life. Got married. Had a son. My mother aged. Rick aged faster. By the time my son was born, Rick had already begun to treat me like a visitor in what used to be my home. Like I was interrupting something. He didn't like when I rearranged things. Didn't like when I mentioned my dad. Didn't like when my son asked questions. That was before he'd say. No need to dwell. My mother never corrected him. She just changed the subject. I learned to swallow my words the same way I always had. It wasn't until last week, a random Tuesday afternoon, that everything cracked open. I was visiting my mother at the nursing home. She was tired. Confused some days. Clear others. Rick's health had declined quickly. Terminal, they said. Everyone spoke in softer voices now. I was helping my mother sort through some old paperwork when she mentioned it casually, the way you mentioned running out of milk. "Oh, Rick has your father's ring," she said. "I gave it to him years ago." For a moment, I didn't understand the words. I remember nodding. Like she'd said something ordinary. Then my body reacted before my mind did. My hands went cold. "What?" I said. She frowned, like I was being strange. "The ring," she repeated. What was I supposed to do with a man's ring? I stared at her. My jaw literally dropped. I could feel it. The muscles just let go. "You didn't think to give it to me?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. "You were busy with your life." Rick needed a ring. Needed. That word landed hard. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, feeling something hot and sharp bloom behind my ribs. The ring I'd carried in my mind for decades. The only thing of my father's I'd wanted. Given away. To the man who replaced him. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't about a ring. It never was. It was about being erased. Looking back now, I can see exactly when our house stopped feeling like ours. It wasn't the wedding day. It wasn't when Rick officially moved in. It was smaller than that. Quieter. It was the day my mother let him change things without asking. At first, it was harmless. Practical, even. Rick didn't like the armchair by the window. My father's chair. The one with the loose leg and the faded fabric. Rick said it hurt his back. "It's old anyway," he said, gripping the armrest, testing it like an inspector. "We should replace it." My mother hesitated. Just a second. Then she nodded. "Okay." The chair was gone the next weekend. No conversation. No warning. It just vanished. In its place came a large leather recliner. Dark brown. New. Rick's chair. I noticed how my mother adjusted her body around it after that. How she waited for him to sit first. How she asked before moving it an inch to vacuum. The house rearranged itself around him. I was 14 and learning something important without realizing it. Love in our family meant accommodation. Rick didn't hit us. He didn't shout. That almost made it worse because it meant there was nothing obvious to point to. He corrected the way I spoke. The way I dressed. The way I ate. Slow down. That's not ladylike. You don't need seconds. He always smiled when he said it. When I tried to tell my mother once, just once, she sighed the way exhausted women sigh when they don't want another problem. He means well, she said. He just has high standards. Standards I never seemed to meet. By the time I was 16, I'd learned how to be small in my own home. I stayed in my room. Did my homework. Didn't argue. Rick liked quiet obedience. He called it respect. Family dinners became performances. Rick talked. My mother nodded. I passed dishes and kept my eyes on my plate. Sometimes he'd ask about school, but only to critique the answer. Art class, he'd scoff. That won't get you anywhere. When I mentioned wanting to study literature, he laughed. Dreams are nice, he said. Reality is different. I remember glancing at my mother, waiting for her to say something. She didn't. That silence taught me more than any lecture ever could. The ring disappeared during those years. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It just stopped being mentioned. I asked about it one last time when I was 17. We were in the hallway. My mother folding towels. Rick watching TV in the next room. Mom, I said, trying to sound casual. Dad's ring, do you still have it? Her hands paused mid-fold. It's safe, she said quickly. With you? Yes. I nodded. I didn't know how to ask the next question. I didn't know how to say, I want it someday. It matters to me. So I swallowed it. Again. Rick proposed to my mother with a different ring. Gold. Bigger. Louder. I noticed something then that stuck with me. After the wedding, Rick started wearing a band. At first, I assumed it was his own. Then one afternoon, years later, I caught a glimpse of his hand in the sunlight. White gold. Small diamond. My stomach dropped. I told myself I was imagining things. That the ring looked similar. That lots of rings look like that. I didn't want to know the truth yet. Sometimes, ignorance feels safer than confirmation. Life carried me forward whether I was ready or not. College. Work. Marriage. A child. Rick aged into his authority. He spoke for my mother more often. Answered questions directed at her. She let him. When my son was born, Rick held him once. Briefly. Awkwardly. He looks like you, he said. Not like my father. Not like family. Just me. As if lineage stopped with me. When my father's name came up, usually because I mentioned him, Rick changed the subject. That was a long time ago, he'd say. No need to dwell. My mother followed his lead. And slowly, painfully, I understood something I hadn't wanted to accept. She had chosen him. Not just as a husband. But as the center. Everything else, including me, including my father's memory, became peripheral. So when she said, decades later, what was I supposed to do with a man's ring? It wasn't shocking. It was confirmation. Still, confirmation hurts more than uncertainty ever does. That night, after leaving the nursing home, I sat in my car for a long time. Didn't turn the engine on. Didn't cry. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Anger bubbled up slowly. Not explosive. Heavy. I thought about my son. About inheritance. About what we pass down. About what gets erased when no one protects it. Rick was terminally ill. My mother was fragile. Everyone would say, this isn't the time. But I kept thinking. If not now, then when? And if I stayed silent again, what else would disappear? There's a certain kind of question you avoid because once you ask it, the answer can't be undone. For years I danced around it. I used softer versions. Indirect ones. Questions that left room for comforting lies. But standing there in the parking lot that night, hands gripping the steering wheel, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I needed clarity, even if it hurt. 2 days later, I went back to the nursing home. Same beige walls. Same antiseptic smell. Same low television murmuring in the background. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair thinner. Her hands trembling slightly as she held a paper cup of juice. For a moment, guilt crept in. What kind of daughter interrogates her sick mother over a piece of jewelry? Then I remembered, it wasn't just jewelry. It was proof. Memory. A tangible connection to a man whose presence had been reduced to photographs and half-forgotten stories. I sat down across from her. We talked about safe things first. My son. The weather. The food. I waited for the right opening, but it never came. So I made one. Mom, I said quietly. I need to ask you something. Her shoulders stiffened. I took that as my answer even before she spoke. Dad's ring, I said. You gave it to Rick, didn't you? She didn't look at me. She stared at her hands instead, rubbing her thumb over the rim of the cup. Yes, she said. Just one word. No apology. No explanation. Just, yes. The room felt suddenly too small. When? I asked. Years ago. Why? She exhaled sharply, as if I were the one being unreasonable. He needed a wedding band, she said. And it was just sitting there. Just sitting there. Like it hadn't carried a lifetime of meaning. Like it wasn't the only physical thing my father wore every day of his adult life. Did you ever think of giving it to me? I asked. That finally made her look up. There was something defensive in her eyes. Almost annoyed. You were young, she said. And then you moved away. And then you had your own life. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out bitter and sharp. So it stopped being mine. It wasn't yours, she snapped. It was mine. I was his wife. That stung more than I expected. Because she was right, legally, maybe. But emotionally. I swallowed. You could have asked, I said. You could have told me. She shook her head. Rick didn't want a fuss. Of course he didn't. That was Rick's favorite way to erase discomfort, by labeling it unnecessary. I sat back, stunned. So Dad's ring, I said slowly, is on the hand of a man who never liked us. Who replaced him? Who treated his daughters like an inconvenience? Her lips pressed together. You're exaggerating. No, I said. I'm remembering. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she said something that cracked whatever was left. It's just a ring. I felt something inside me give way. Years of restraint. Of swallowed resentment. Of careful politeness. Then why didn't you give him your ring? I asked. Why not something that belonged to you? She flinched. Because she knew the answer. Because she knew that giving him my father's ring symbolically erased him. And made Rick the rightful replacement. I stood up then. My legs were shaking, but I didn't sit back down. I won't argue, I said. I just needed to know. She looked relieved. Relief. Not remorse. As I walked out, I passed a nurse in the hallway who smiled at me kindly. I almost wished she'd been cruel instead. In the car, the anger finally surfaced. It wasn't loud. It was heavy. The kind that settles into your bones and stays there. I thought about asking Rick for it. Demanding it. But the image made my stomach churn. Him looking at me like I was greedy. Ungrateful. Petty. My mother backing him. Again. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation over and over. Not the ring. The way she'd said it wasn't yours. The way she'd chosen peace with him over honesty with me. The way history had been quietly rewritten, and I was expected to accept it. I realized something important then. This wasn't about a ring anymore. It was about inheritance of memory. And who gets to decide what matters? I didn't plan to confront him. In fact, I told myself I wouldn't. Rick was old. Sick. Dying, even. Everyone said the same thing when his name came up. Now isn't the time. As if time had ever been on my side. But life has a way of pushing your hand when you keep folding. A week after my visit to the nursing home, my phone rang while I was making dinner. It was my mother's number. That alone made my chest tighten. I wiped my hands and answered. Her voice was strained. Thin. Rick's asking about you, she said. I closed my eyes. What about me? He wants to see you. Of course he did. I almost said no. Every instinct screamed to protect what little peace I had left. But another part of me, the part that had spent decades shrinking, was tired of running. I'll come, I said. The hospice facility was quieter than the nursing home. Not just in sound, in energy. Like everyone there was waiting. Rick lay in the bed, smaller than I remembered. His once commanding presence reduced to pale skin and shallow breaths. For a second pity flickered. Then I saw it. The ring. My father's ring. Still on his finger. Something inside me hardened. He smiled when he saw me. A weak one. But still familiar. Hey, he said. Didn't think you'd come. I didn't either, I replied. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand. The same hand. No one mentioned the ring. So I did. That's my father's, I said, nodding toward it. The room went still. Rick looked down at his hand, then back at me. Oh, he said. This old thing. Old thing. My mother shifted uncomfortably. She gave it to me, Rick continued. I didn't take it. I know, I said. That doesn't make it okay. He sighed, like I was exhausting him. You don't understand how marriage works, he said. When your dad died, your mom needed support. Support. That word again. And this ring supported her. I asked. My mother finally spoke. Please, she said. Don't do this here. But I was done postponing my pain for other people's comfort. I want it back, I said. Rick blinked. Why, he asked. What are you going to do with it? I didn't owe him an answer. But I gave him one anyway. I want my son to know his grandfather existed, I said. And that he mattered. Rick was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. A soft, dismissive sound. You're sentimental, he said. Always have been. That was it. Not cruel. Not dramatic. Just minimizing, like he'd done my entire life. My mother squeezed his hand tighter. Rick's not well, she said. Let's not create conflict. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't protecting him. She was protecting the story she'd built. A story where choices had no casualties. I'm not creating conflict, I said. I'm naming it. Rick exhaled and reached toward the bedside table. From a small tray, he lifted the ring off his finger. For a split second, my heart surged. Then he stopped. Held it between us. You want it, he asked. After all these years. Yes. He smiled faintly. Then asked nicely. My hands curled into fists. I realized something in that moment. Even dying, he wanted control. And my mother was letting him have it. I'm not begging, I said. He shrugged and slid the ring back on. Then I guess it stays where it is. Something broke but something else formed too. Resolve. I stood. I hope you're at peace, I said, not unkindly. But I won't pretend this didn't matter. I turned to my mother. I love you, I said. But I won't be silent anymore. Her eyes filled with tears. But she didn't stop me. As I walked out, the finality settled in. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with clarity. And sometimes, that costs more than any inheritance. I didn't cry when I got home. That surprised me. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, still wearing my coat, staring at the sink like I'd forgotten what it was for. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My son was at a friend's place. No one needed anything from me for once. I sat down at the table and finally let myself breathe. Not relief. Not peace. Just space. For years I'd imagined that moment, the confrontation, the outcome. I thought it would feel decisive. Victorious or devastating. Instead, it felt unfinished. Like a sentence cut off mid-thought. That night, I pulled out the old box I kept in the hall closet. The one I almost never opened. Inside were the few things of my father's that had survived moves, time, and my mother's idea of moving on. A watch that no longer worked. 2 photos. A folded receipt with his handwriting on it. That was it. I ran my thumb over the ink until my eyes burned. I realized something then. The ring hurt not because it was gone, but because it was proof of a pattern. My mother didn't erase my father out of malice. She erased him out of convenience. Rick made space for himself by shrinking everyone else. And my mother let him. Because it was easier. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Rick was upset after you left. He didn't sleep well. I stared at the screen. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just consequences, again, for me naming something uncomfortable. I typed, deleted, retyped. Then finally sent. I didn't come to hurt him. I came to tell the truth. She didn't reply. Days passed. Then a call from the hospice. Rick had taken a turn. They said it gently, like people do when they're used to delivering endings. I didn't rush over. That surprised me too. I sat with the guilt instead. Let it speak. It sounded like my mother's voice. Like everyone who'd ever told me to be the bigger person. But underneath that guilt was something steadier. A knowing. I had already grieved him, not the man, but the role he played in my life. Control. Dismissal. Distance. When Rick died, I felt neutral. Not cold. Not cruel. Just done. At the small service, the ring was there again, this time on a velvet cushion. Someone mentioned it was a meaningful symbol of his marriage. I didn't correct them. I watched my mother nod along, eyes glossy, accepting condolences for a life she'd chosen. Afterward, she pulled me aside. I don't know why you made things so hard at the end, she said quietly. I looked at her. At the woman who survived loss by erasing it. I didn't, I said. I just stopped making it easy. She looked away. That was the moment I understood something clearly, maybe for the first time. Closure doesn't come from getting what you're owed. It comes from deciding what you'll no longer chase. That night, I went home and sat with my son on the couch. He leaned against me, half listening as I told him stories about his grandfather. The way he laughed. The way he fixed things slowly, carefully. My son listened. Asked questions. Smiled. And in that moment I knew. Legacy isn't an object. It's memory. Voice. Truth passed forward. The ring could stay buried with a man who never understood its weight. I carried what mattered. After Rick's funeral, life didn't dramatically change. That's the strange part. No revelations. No apologies. No sudden softness from my mother. Just quiet. The kind that feels awkward at first, like a room after people leave but the chairs are still warm. My mother went back to the nursing home. Our conversations became shorter. Polite. Careful. Like we were both aware there were things we could no longer afford to touch. I stopped trying to explain myself. That felt like a loss at first. Then it started to feel like relief. One afternoon, weeks later, I took my son to the park. We sat on a bench, watching him kick at the gravel with his sneakers. He asked me out of nowhere what my dad was like. Not the big questions. The small ones. What music did he like? Was he strict? Did he ever get mad? I answered slowly. I noticed how careful I was being, not to rewrite him as perfect, not to turn him into a saint. Just honest. He wasn't loud, I said. But when he listened, you felt it. My son nodded, like that made sense to him. That night, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel robbed anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something quieter. Not forgiveness. Not exactly. Acceptance, but the kind that doesn't excuse. I finally understood that the ring was never really about inheritance. It was about being considered. And I had spent too many years trying to earn that from people who benefited from my silence. I stopped calling my mother as often. I didn't announce it. Didn't explain. I just stepped back. And nothing collapsed. That was the most telling part. One evening, I opened that old box again. The watch. The photos. The receipt. I added something new. A handwritten letter. To my son. I wrote about his grandfather. About loss. About how families don't always protect what they should, and how that doesn't mean you stop protecting yourself. I sealed it and put it back in the box. Not for now. For someday. Because legacy isn't what gets passed down when someone dies. It's what survives when people choose not to pass things down. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Ownership. Of my story. Of my boundaries. Of my voice. I didn't get the ring. But I got something better. I stopped waiting for permission to matter. Sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't theft. It's erasure. And healing doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like stepping away quietly. And deciding you will never be invisible again. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. Some losses don't leave bruises, they leave silence. And choosing yourself after that isn't selfish. It's survival. Thank you for listening.